Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Card Dad. I've got a guy on here that I've had dialogue with for years, but never had on my channel before, John Mangini of the John Mangini Collection. John, how are you doing, man?
I'm great, Dustin. Thanks for having me on.
Sometimes
Carolina guy. We're both in the opposite Carolinas.
That's right. You're right down the road, basically.
Yeah.
I've been watching your show for a long time, really. Going back years. So, and we've had dialogue before, but I thought it was strange. I was like, man, I don't think I've ever had John on my channel. So I figured we need to reach out. And then also, I thought there would be kind of some fun topics that we could dance around and kind of debate and all that sort of a stuff. All right, so I think that we need to go ahead and just tackle the elephant that's in the room. And I know that some of your buddies, they don't like me too much because they make it very clear when they throw out little jabs at me. There's a thing there, and I don't know if I wouldn't say it's probably like on a grand scale, because I've got a lot of friends, I think, that are kind of within your community. I'll say your community because it's a large vintage community. I know you collect modern cards. I do know that. But when I think about the national and who gets together and the group of people that get together, I know a lot of the people that are kind of in that group that you're in. I've got friends in your group for sure. But what is it about, I guess, maybe kind of the pre-2020 YouTubers? And then if you look at kind of post-2020, there is some friction there at times. And sometimes I can understand it. Sometimes I'll poke the bear a little bit. But then sometimes I don't understand it at all. So I wanted to hear it from you because you're in it, and you would understand how to answer it. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think, it's just during the boom, you have this collecting thing going on that many people have been doing their life. And then the boom hits and it's just one big, sales pitch, and the flippers, and nobody can buy cards anymore, and everybody's on YouTube telling you you're going to get rich flipping cards, and they're harder to come by. The prices are going up, and you have people who really are just brand new to the hobby, acting like they're card experts. And I think, any kind of change is just hard to handle, right? Like, sometimes in life, and this is what happened in the sports card world, there's a big change that happens, and it changes things forever. And it's not always easy to handle. For instance, I did a lot of flying before 9/11. I flew all over the world. I loved to fly. I used to go 15 minutes beforehand, just walk onto the plane, walk through security. It was wonderful. After 9/11, I hate flying. I drive anytime I can drive. That has changed for me. It has ruined something that was good for me. And it's just the way it is, though. Like, I have to deal with it. Doesn't mean I have to like it. And no matter how many names people call me or what they call me or tell me I should die, like some people have, that's not going to change the fact I'm not going to like flying now.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, specifically, and I know exactly what you're saying, and I definitely joined in during that. So I can remember channels going back that don't have a channel anymore that were talking about buying, selling cards, investing in cards, all that sort of a thing. And there was quick and easy money to be made in a very short period of time. And that, of course, always draws in. We could be talking about anything. We could talk about trading cards or stocks or crypto or whatever. Anytime you have that, what happened in 2020, 2021, it's going to attract a lot of people. And I was one of those that came in at that time period. But there was a variety of different reasons for that. I mean, one of them was we had just hit the pandemic, and I was already into collectibles for about 18 months, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. So that was kind of a way for me to just like put myself out there. I did understand with YouTube that there could be an opportunity where you can monetize, you can maybe get sponsorships and all that sort of a thing, but it wasn't anywhere in the near horizon at all for me. I was just enjoying really getting to know other people, talking about the stuff that I was, kind of throwing out my 2 cents. I was enjoying that. I never had any sort of, I guess, like any sponsorship money. Probably like it was 18 months before I ever got, the first sponsor money. And, just from like YouTube ad revenue, that's not any sort of money. Like that's not like any kind of, that's just kind of like a little bonus. Like, oh, cool. Like you make a few bucks here and there, and that's great. But
you could buy a few cards.
Yeah, yeah, and
every month.
that's cool. But did you kind of look at my channel as one of those, specifically that was kind of a know-it-all type card guy? And the reason why I asked that is because I was trying to come at it from more of like, I got back into collectibles, I'm 40 or whatever, and here's my journey. I never wanted to come at it as like, buy these cards because this is where it's at.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
get
yeah.
in.
No,
Get in before it's too
you
late.
never came across like that. I think, just from some of the people that had been on there for years, it was like overnight, uh, everybody wanted to either be a YouTube business or sell their program to you or their newsletter for 199 a month, and that's what just took over the algorithm, right? And new people coming on, that's all they see is that kind of stuff. And then you have, Jeff Wilson had turned the card market, the hobby into a stock market, and portraying himself as an expert in cards, and some of us would kind of get triggered here and there. I remember watching a video where somebody came up to him with a Red Heart mantle and a Dandy mantle, and he's saying how rare they are. And it's clear he never saw those cards before. Or opening, paying $15,000 for 1988 Fleer basketball. I mean, those of us who opened those know they're not all going to be tens, and he's getting sevens and eights. It's actually kind of funny to watch. I know it wasn't so long ago he opened 1967 packs, and he opened a Clemente poster, and he had never seen it, had no idea what it was, and even after research came back on and said it was rare. And I mean, they're inserts, so they're certainly not as common as cards, but believe me, they are not rare. Yeah. So you're just seeing all this stuff, and people, saying influencers to young people, who are listening to this, to rack up your credit card with sports cards, and saying how he racked up $30,000 and explaining why that's so intelligent. And it's just, it's just hard to hear. Now, I get it. Everybody has a right to do whatever they want. We can watch, we can not watch, we can just move on. I never leave any kind of hate comments. I just move on if I don't want to say something good. I'm not out there trolling anybody, and I know there are, and I get them as well. Especially when I talk grading. If you say anything bad about PSA, they come at you. The cult.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think that everyone's got kind of the trolls that come for you, especially if you have any sort of audience, or you've kind of built up some audience. You will have a troll. They will come eventually. So be careful what you wish for. That's part of the channel growth thing that you don't really want, but it comes.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, the hobby has so many different players. Everybody just needs to get along. I mean, it's gotten a little out of hand. I had mentioned earlier, there was an influencer who actually said he wishes all vintage collectors would go die already, so that they can have the hobby to themselves. So when you see your hobby, I guess for the vintage collectors, it just feels like the hobby was hijacked overnight, just hijacked from you. And then we have to pay all these prices. If you're a collector, you have to pay up for all your cards now. You can't buy packs at Target. I still can't find any good packs anywhere. They're all gone immediately. If you on the flip side of that, if you care, and maybe you're getting way up in years, and you're maybe wanting to sell your cards, it could be a good thing too. Just depends on where you're at. But not having access to cards, having to pay way more, seeing cards sold before people even have them in hand. I sold a card to somebody, and the guy put it on my own page on Facebook 5 minutes later. I mean, this is, these are the kinds of things that are going on. And I see, I was watching a card. It was selling, they were asking like $2,500 for it. I saw it sold. I think he got it for $1,800 or $2,000. And 2 weeks later, it's on there for $8,000. And I saw that over and over and over again. So it's just, it's just annoying. I don't know why anybody would enjoy that situation as a collector.
Is it more normal? Because obviously we went through kind of like boom and bust, and vintage did a little bit of that too, where you had like high grade vintage went ballistic just like everything else in 2021, but then it did correct back down, and it's stable. Vintage is always pretty stable, but Is it a good time now? Like, do you feel like, okay, like we're in a pretty normal pricing environment for, for vintage stuff? And then I guess the other part of that question would be, I know that you don't necessarily, you're looking for more kind of rare vintage stuff that you don't see every day. Not that you don't appreciate 50s and 60s baseball cards, but you go to any card show, especially go to the National, hell, you'll see those all day long on every table, it feels like. So I know you're looking for more of kind of the needle in the haystack stuff. Are you having, I guess, just as good of a time, as you did going back pre-pandemic, now that things have kind of chilled out a little bit?
Well, I am, and I continued to, but I had to adjust my, I had to adjust my tolerance of what I was willing to pay.
Yeah.
I had it, and it took me a while to get settled. I think where we're at now, a lot of the vintage guys you'll see on here on YouTube, if you go to Strongsville, you go to the National, you see people dropping 30 grand on cards and stuff. And I think we're at a point where people just have more of a warm and fuzzy that those are going to retain their value. Because even if you're not investing, even if you don't plan on selling, you certainly don't want to buy a card for 30 grand that's going to be worth 15, in 6 months. You don't want to be stupid about it either. So my tolerance has definitely gone up. And you just have to pay up for some things. Now, everybody's chasing, and these really haven't come down in value much, the big cards in the hobby. I mean, I'll tell you, I'll see 15 1952 Mickey Mantles for sale on Facebook every week, right? Like constantly. And you see those same big cards, the Leaf Jackie and all the big ones, the Gaudy Babe Ruth, those kinds of things. And they haven't come. Some of them have come down a little bit, but not much. And so I think like a lot of, especially the newer people in the hobby who are now getting into vintage or got into vintage from the get-go, they don't know a lot of the cards I'm going after. So I don't have the competition of somebody shopping for that Gaudy Babe Ruth or that DeLong Lou Gehrig, right? A lot of the stuff that I have is kind of under the radar. And that's what I do on my channel. I teach about those sets.
Yeah. I was just thinking, as you were saying, everyone's kind of got, and I'm kind of in the same boat too. Everyone has to kind of have a little bit more of an appetite to spend based on just the fact that a lot of the stuff, especially going back 5-7 years, everything is just a little bit more expensive, or in some cases a lot more expensive. How much
That's no different with buying a home. You have to have a little bit more of an appetite to buy a home these days.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much everything, eggs, houses,
Everything,
whatever it
yeah.
is. But how much of that do you think plays into like the camaraderie of the group and like the friendship and because I have that with my friends too. It's kind of like when we go to the National, I'm not saying that I'm going to go spend $1 zillion at the National, but you get in kind of like a friend. I don't know. It's like a weird little frenzy. Like I know for like Flippin' Steve, you had him on your channel. And I know he's going to have cash at the National, and I'm joking, like, I'm going to help you spend it, because I might not be buying it, but I'm excited to help him spend it, to see what he's going to get. Same with my buddies. But I have to assume it's probably similar with you guys too, when you're out there and you're all kind of collecting similar things, and there's, you're telling each other what you saw at whatever table. Is it like a frenzy? It's kind of like sharks in the water, looking for something to add.
I don't see it that way, like in person when we're running around in groups, but I do see it that way on YouTube, right? Everybody's influenced these days. You see something you didn't know it existed, you got to have it, and I see that all the time. There are people, I show cards and they'll text me. I just had a friend of mine text me, I got one of these, and it's something like there's only like 3 graded. I have one behind me, and he found one, didn't know it existed. And I'll see cards, that somebody shows, and I didn't know it existed. So, that gets onto your radar. I think there's a lot of influence, number one, and that can be a good thing, or maybe a bad thing if you're like overspending and getting yourself into trouble. I guess it just depends on how you look at it. But there's definitely influencers on YouTube, not trying to be influencers, but when you're into cards and you're seeing all these great cards, and then you have some keeping up with the Joneses too. Somebody's got this card. Well, I'm going to spend more, and I'm going to get me a nice card like that. You see all these people buying these big cards, and you want to do that too. The question I guess I have for the long term values of cards is, will that continue? right? Or is everybody just blowing their wad now?
It's a weird time because we have, I mean, looking back, and I wasn't here 10 years, 15 years ago, but when I look at kind of price charts, if you're looking at whatever these price, these price charts going back, you can look at sold listings going back 10 years, and it was pretty flat, for a long time. And then of course
Yes.
it went like crazy, and then it corrected, but it still corrected a lot higher than where it was 5 to 7 years ago. And then, it begs the question, like, and again, it's going to be specific cards. It's going to depend on the card, depend on all what variety of different things. But will it continue to trend up, or was it just some sort of wild, weird little, thing? It is obviously, hindsight's always 2020, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I've always said since the beginning of the boom is I believe I mean, there are different factors that can affect that. People's interests change, different generations. You just never know. But I always felt like the one thing that will affect it the most is the economy. We live in the most affluent society in the history of the world. And
Yep.
when you look at the age group that is just above me, and into my age group, you were talking about the first people to retire millionaires in their 401k. You were talking about the first people to inherit $1 million homes from their parents who are paid off.
Yeah.
We've just never seen anything like it. And then you have sports cards going wild. You have Bitcoin going wild. You have gold going wild. Stocks going wild. There's just money coming from everywhere. What happens when if those were to reverse? What would your appetite be for sports cards then? So I think the economy would be the number one thing to derail it.
Yeah. It's also, because I don't know if I heard you talking about this, but even going back to when I was a kid, it was very simple times. You're going to the grocery store, you're going to the gas station to buy a pack of cards and Big League Chew, or, RC Colas and Moon Pies or whatever, like I have a very kind of similar, that's a similar story to somebody that grew up in the 60s or 70s. It's kind of the same story. But if you look at how it is now, I mean, I guess you can get a box of cards at Walmart or Target, but it's not $1 a pack. It's $40 or $50 a box. And I get it. Everything is relative and whatever, and inflation and all that, but it's still it's so much more expensive buying packs, I mean, and that's why I'm always like harping on everyone who wants me to shut up about it, but just buying singles instead of buying boxes and buying the packs. But the problem is like, if you go back to like when I was growing up, when you were growing up, you were just buying packs because you could buy them at 50 cents or $1 or whatever less, I mean, it was, now granted, there wasn't a one of one, logo man chase card in there, but it didn't matter. That's not why we weren't, that wasn't the world we were living in. It was just cool to get a star or a rookie, it was just a different time.
Well, I think you hit on something very astute, and that is that for generations, things didn't really change that much. And there's a huge gap now in generations. My parents' generation wasn't that different from mine. If you grew up in the 80s, you had an earring, your dad thought it was crazy, and, that was nuts. But really, all that really changed was the music, the fashion. There wasn't a whole lot that changed from generation to generation. And I tell young people today, this has been the biggest change. What young people grew up today, we didn't have to go through. We didn't live in the same world, really, with the technological advances and school shootings and all the craziness that takes place today. I had an old mentor, and he said something, and it always stuck with me. He told me this in college, and it just always stuck with me because it's so intelligent. And he said, the old people will always tell you, well, when I was your age, or when I was 16, we didn't do that. It wasn't like that. And he said, you were never my age. You were never 16 in 2025. Mm-hmm. And only if you were 16 in 2025 could you be my age. We're never the same age. And so times change. And like I said at the beginning, change is tough. Change is tough for people. It's when you've gone decades having something a certain way, and then it's just all flipped upside down, and it's unrecognizable.
Now, given now, one of the big things that's changed, of course, is just kind of the gambling element that's attached to the hobby. There's always been some of that, of course, with pack odds and all of that, but it's on a whole different scale now with price points of boxes and new product. And even, I mean, what we're talking about, repacks and breaking and kind of the effects that has. Do you think, though, that, is there kind of even though that's not something that I participate in, I don't think that you do, but, is that something that, makes the hobby bigger? Is that something that basically it's kind of a net positive, even though it's not something that it's the change thing? I'm like, obviously everyone can spend their money however they want to. I'm worried about and this goes beyond, cards, but the whole sports betting thing taking over society and culture really bothers the hell out of me and especially for young people, especially, 15 to 25-year-olds, I always think about because they're impressionable. And if it just becomes very normal to gamble away your paycheck, we already have issues in this country, just talking about the U.S. about credit card debt and our national debt. And, there's all sorts of, things that we got to tackle. And this is like the next thing that I think is going to be a wave of bankruptcies and, everything else that'll come. And not even just sports cards, but sports betting and everything else that comes along with that. But what's your take, I guess, on just that shift, that part of the shift in our hobby? Is it, as a singles buyer, doesn't affect us, and maybe it's a benefit to us if it's just pushing singles into the market, we can get at them. But, I mean, what is your overall take?
Well, it's a huge thing in the hobby right now, and it certainly is something that's keeping the hobby exciting. I don't know if it's bringing new people in, but it's certainly keeping them. I was on with Dr. Beckett on his podcast, and I brought this up. I did a video several years ago, it's probably before they were even breaking. And it was meant to be a spoof. It was just satire. And I was pretending like I was a card addict. And but I was using an analogy of a drug addict kind of thing. And even though it was many years ago, and even though my old videos get very few comments, this one continues to get comments and people telling me how, they can't help themselves and they want to quit and they've spent all their money and they're in debt, but they can't stop. So back to your point there. The thing is we can't be policemen for the hobby. I mean, people have to control themselves. They could gamble on football. They could go get on drugs. I mean, it's like, I don't know what we can do about it. It is the hobby. There's so much money being made by everybody doing the breaking. I don't know, Dustin, should we do anything about it? If you could do something about it, would you?
Well, so in financial services, going back in time, I've seen working in financial services going back when I was in my younger years, I've seen instances of kind of burgeoning industries that have kind of they've come up and they're not regulated at all. And there's some good parts to that. I mean, we had some, uncapped commissions and some really nice, benefits, that came along with it. But inevitably, it always ends the same. And look, I'm not a big regulation guy. I'm not a big government guy. That's not me at all. However, you usually end up, what I've seen is there's always a few bad apples that ruin it and just get mega greedy. And then somebody steps in, the state, whether it's federal or states or whoever it is, some government body will get a hold of it and say all right, let's add some guardrails in here. I mean, look, I'm not a big government, big reg guy, but there also used to be people dying in factories, working in factories, 100 years ago. So I think there's some guardrails that you should have in place.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not a big regulation person either, but there are certainly occasions where some guardrails are needed.
I don't like minors participating, especially with breaks and with repacks. And, I've heard, folks say okay, well, you have to have a credit card to participate. Well, my daughter has basically a Visa allowance card. It's essentially, we just load money on it for her allowance as opposed to handing her cash. She has a little, Visa card that we put her allowance on, and she can go to Target and she can buy it. So technically, I mean, she's got a credit card and she's 12, I mean, so, and you hear this oh, this kid is 15 and he won 100, a Mac Jones, one of one, and he sold it. Thank God he sold it. But I mean, I'm wait a second, a 15-year-old was in on this break. It just happy that he got that card, but is that kid now going to be buying into breaks for the rest of his life because he got that one major, huge win?
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I went to a Catholic school, a private school, and I'll tell you, when I was in high school, there was nothing on this planet I couldn't get as a high school student. Like, is it much different? I mean, no matter what if whatever you wanted, bad things, you could get bad things. We've always had access to it. It's just in a much bigger way now because of social media. I'm not a proponent of kids getting involved in that in a big way. If they're going to have problems or something like that. I don't participate. I used to participate. There was a company, I don't know if they're still around. They're called Vintage Breaks, and they would open packs of 86 Fleer, 52 tops, or just get like somebody's collection or whatever. Like, they'd have one beat up Mickey Mantle from 52, and then they'd have the rest of the set, and you could, win one of the cards. And sometimes they opened more modern packs or even some vintage packs. So, and then they had Razes too. Remember the Razes?
I remember the Razes I remember in 2020.
I never knew how that was legal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's definitely not, but it was always something that kind of flew under the radar. But I remember in 2020 in particular during the pandemic and thinking like, what is this that people are doing? And it was these Razes, where everyone throws in $100 or whatever, and then somebody wins the card. And I'm like, my God, what is it? Like, this is insane.
Well, the sellers made good profits on that, right? They're guaranteed their money. And they would do it higher. If it was an $800 card, they, have collect $1,000 and so 10 people $100 slot or whatever. They were guaranteed to make their money. It definitely favored the sellers in that scenario. I assume they don't have them anymore because of legality, but I don't know that because breaking has taken over that. It's not much different though.
Yeah, agreed.
And one bad thing about breaking, I'll tell you right now, for collectors, is access to product and jacking up the price of the products.
Yeah.
I mean, these breakers could buy them, but how's the average Joe supposed to buy boxes of cards anymore? Not the good stuff. We got to go get, MVP at Target.
I don't understand why, when Michael Rubin says that 40% of Topps product goes to breakers, 40% goes to card stores, and 20% goes to the big box retailers, Walmart, Target, whoever. I'm thinking like, why the hell don't you have 20% going to breakers, 20% going direct to consumer? Because that could be a really easy way. And people are like, oh, the bots would get it. Why wouldn't they just have like an email system to where you have, an email on file, your Topps customer, you've ordered something, so they've got your email on file, and then 72 hours before release or whatever, the emails go out. Hey, you got a 2-box maximum. Here's your opportunity to buy XYZ, whatever that new product is. If you don't order it within 72 hours, then it goes off to the card stores or the breakers. But then you have like a nice happy medium where the public, the general public that just wants to open a box at a reasonable rate, they can get it. They have a shot at it, and it's like, that just seems like common sense to me. I don't understand why that.
Yeah, well, I just think it's the money driving it. I mean, they're going to sell more to the breakers who are just going to show out. I mean, if they have to pay $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 for a box, they're going to do that. They're going to get their money back with the breakers, but you're not going to have collectors doing that. They're not going to sell the boxes. They've gone up too high.
But that's kind of the problem with the Topps marketing that I have right now. There's a lot of good things that they do from a marketing standpoint that I do like, but there's also just a ton of effort putting into join Fanatics Live for the next break. That's coming. Join for this. Hit this Tom Brady 1 of 1 for the new Topps Chrome product that came out. As opposed to, they also do some stories. They do some feel good stories occasionally as well, talking about like fathers and sons and collecting cards. But there's not enough emphasis on that to me. And why aren't they? You're friggin' Topps. You're Topps. Like, market the sets that have come before. Like, why don't you have 52 Topps in a commercial? Like, just talking about it. Why don't you have some of these amazing sets from?
But you're not Topps. You're Fanatics.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that Fanatics needs to recognize they own Topps, and that's its own deal. It's kind of a big deal. It's like owning, I don't know, it's like owning Rolls Royce and not talking about the history of Rolls Royce and how it came to be and all that. I mean, it's just weird to me. It's weird that there's not more of an effort there.
Yeah, I hear you.
But all right, let's shift over. Let's shift to collector versus investor. And I think this is a good topic because I consider myself to be a hybrid of these two things. I joke on the channel, of course, about like my Bobby Hebert cards, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, the Cajun Cannon that no one remembers.
I remember him.
Yeah. Like I have Bubby Brister cards and I've got Bobby Hebert cards. I know that I'm not going to retire off of those cards, but I also have certain cards as well where I have paid up for those cards with the hope. I'm not retiring off of those cards, but there's a hope that, over time they do trend up, based on, a variety of different factors. I've done the research and that sort of a thing. Now, I guess talk to me about that, because I know you have kind of a combination of these two things. You have, huge cards that, that are in your collection. You didn't necessarily pay huge prices for them, but you have cards that have appreciated over time. And then you have, cards that are not expensive cards that you enjoy as well. But what's your take overall, kind of investor versus collector, the combination of the two?
I think most people are turning into a hybrid these days. I really do. You have people who are investors who maybe caught the collecting bug and keep certain cards for themselves, where they might have sold everything before. I think you have that going on. I know there were always dealers who had a little side collection, special cards. They kept a little small collection for themselves. And you certainly have people who are collectors. You just can't ignore these values, Dustin. So it's hard not to sell when you see these things going through the roof, especially like if you're a true collector. What a lot of people I know are doing is they're selling their high grades and buying lower grades that, they like the look of better or look just as good to them. Because you can't tell the difference between a 9 and a 10. So if you could get 50,000 for a 10 and they buy an 8 for 200 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that, right there, I guess you're an investor. You're a flipper, whatever you want to call it. They're taking advantage of the current situation. When you have, 1986 Topps cards, if they're in a 10 selling for $5,000, if you're a collector, you're almost crazy not to sell that.
But so if you have your investor hat on, because a card that I love, I've always thought about this too. If I just had millions and I was just like, you know what, I've got some money to spend on cards. Why not? I'll diversify into some like pretty big cards. An example of a card that I think that I would love to have is an 86 Topps Jerry Rice rookie and a PSA 10 specifically, as well as a Montana rookie in a PSA 10. And in part because I look at how much a lot of the modern, ultra modern cards sell for, and then I compare it to those cards that, the populations are not huge. I guess in relation to modern, ultra modern cards, those feel like bargain shopping. When you look at the Rice, I think it's like a $60,000 or $70,000 card in a PSA 10, or a Walter Payton rookie in a PSA 10. It's probably an $80,000 card. I mean, hell, did you
ever think you'd see the day?
What's that?
Did you ever think you'd see the day that those were the prices of those cards?
Well, I don't remember. So I don't remember. I got back in 2018 and I bought, I bought a Montana rookie card that was an 8, I think, for like $100, and it shot up to like $400, and now it's like $175. But I don't think I ever looked at what a PSA 10 cost back then, because it was just never like in my like purview. I was like, I bought like a Jim Brown rookie, a PSA 3 Jim Brown rookie for $213. And I was like, I am insane. I can't believe I spent $200 on a football card.
I know.
So I never even bothered looking at like 10s or any of that stuff. But you're right. I mean, probably it's 2018. That stuff was probably, a quarter of the price.
I bought one of my favorite cards growing up was the 81 Magic Johnson. And, I bought it. I have all kinds of 10s, but like I really didn't care. When grading first came out, you get a little enamored with that, but I look at my 10 and I have the bird and a 9. I look at them side by side. I don't enjoy the Magic more than the bird. I mean, other than I like that card better, but I would enjoy it just as much if it was a 9 or a 7. Like, I could care less personally.
So are you?
But I missed the boat because I found out that card and I'm such an idiot for not knowing this, was selling for something like $59,000 at the peak of the boom.
Oh wow.
And I want to tell you, I would sell that so fast your head would spin. And I go pay 200 and get a 9, or pay 80 and get a 7, or whatever.
Well, it's probably still expensive. I'm going to look it up.
It
Keep
came
going.
way down, so I'm like, hey, I might as well hold on to it now. Maybe it'll go back to 59,000.
Yeah, where is it at now?
But I kick myself, man, every day that I didn't know that was I could have sold it for that. I would have sold that so fast, because I don't collect numbers. Like that 10 means nothing to me. The card does, and
Oh
I can get a
yes.
beautiful 9 or 8 or 7. I can't tell the difference and enjoy
Yeah,
it just as much.
you're right. Yeah, it's an $8,000 card right now. And I'm sure you
Oh, is it
probably
8?
it's
Wait, it
about
went back up. I thought it was selling into 5s.
yeah, well, there's a sale March 8th for $7,900, but I see exactly what you're talking about. There's one like wild sale at like 50 plus $1,000 back
Yeah, it
in
was
the
insane. I had
and
my
right
friend,
around there.
my friend had the Larry Bird, and he sold it for around $50,000, something like that, an insane amount of money. And he bought himself a 52 Mickey Mantle because that's the card he
Yeah.
really wanted. So the thing is the hobby. I have my dad has a friend who's from New York, and he has a big family. And every time he sees his family, they bring him a binder or a box of cards. And my dad always calls me, "Hey, next time you're up, take a look at these. Let me know if there's anything in here." All these people want to know what their cards are. And as I'm going through that, the hard truth is most cards aren't worth anything. They're worth very little. Most cards.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing now is PSA 10s or nothing unless it's the 49 Leaf Jackie, Babe Ruth, the certain big cards, even that beautiful Jim Brown rookie you have. I mean, in a 10, sure, but they don't
Yeah.
sell for what they should in the lower grades. They're not selling for similar to the 49 Jackie or anything like that. So it's all about the grade now. It's all about the numbered. It's all about the rookie auto. And I find this auto thing funny, just as somebody that's older and collected all my life. Mickey Mantle made more money selling his autograph in retirement than he ever made playing baseball. Right?
Yeah, it's wild.
These guys, if they live old, imagine a 19-year-old player or any young NBA players, baseball players, in their early 20s, how many autographs they will sign over the course of their lifetime. It'll be a million.
Yeah.
But I guess if it's on a rookie card, it's worth $1 million.
Yeah, it's weird now. It's almost kind of like a conveyor belt, like a slaughterhouse almost, like to where like the hobby's
Yeah.
turned into like now you have these athletes, they come out, they're signed to huge deals. Whereas like Mickey Mantle, clearly like when he was playing baseball, this wasn't a thing, but now a guy coming up playing baseball, hell, he's got a nil deal probably in high school. He's already making money in high school. These guys are making more money like in high school than Mickey Mantle made playing pro ball, and then
So
they get into college. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's like a totally different world. It's like now they're kind of like born and bred this way. I just coach my son plays. I was going on a little tangent here. My son plays flag football. All my kids played youth sports. And it's funny to me to watch, like I'm going out there and we take it seriously. I'm not saying that like we're not competitive. We certainly are. He's 10, so this isn't like a high school team or anything, but still we want to go out there and win. And we talk, we're like practicing throughout the week and all that sort of thing. But these kids, man, they are, I swear, like some of them will probably have some sort of like a nil deal scholarship, in high school like that. Like some of these parents and these kids, like youth sports, especially baseball. My God, like my son played high school baseball, all the politics and all the stuff, all the travel leagues and all the stuff that goes into sports now. It's totally different than when I was a kid. It's completely,
well, especially in college, making money. These kids are coming out millionaires. They may never play in the pros or anything.
Yep.
Why do you think there's such a fascination with the autographed card? Because I remember when it first started, I was really shocked by it. That there's such a premium on it. I've never been much of an auto guy, so that may be why. But why do you think that that's so important to people, the autograph? Like, would you rather have a one of one or one of 25 that's
Now,
autographed?
are you talking about as far as like vintage cards that are autographed, or like
No,
a
no,
signed
no,
base,
no. The rookie
or
autos.
modern, all the like modern stuff?
Well, yeah. I mean, going back, this started in like back in the early 2000s. These
Yeah,
auto,
I mean,
But
like,
why do you think it carries such a premium? I mean, it might go for $1 million, where the next highest rookie card goes for 10,000.
yeah, I think the tricky part nowadays too, like Otani is a great example of this, where I'm looking at like even like now, granted, he's been in the league for a while, he's got a lot of autograph cards, second year, third year, whatever. But even just his 2018 stuff, I look at some of the sales; they're massive on these 2018 auto cards. But I have no idea how to really tell the difference. I understand kind of the first Bowman, the superfractor type stuff. I understand kind of the provenance and the importance of that one. But what about all the other ones? And how do you compare across? But they all sell for huge money. I mean, none of them go cheap.
I
None of
know.
them, and so I don't know
They made
how.
a setback. I think it was, oh man, I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember if it was the late 90s or early 2000s. There was an autograph set, and all the autos faded over time. Do you know about that set?
I'm not
They put
sure.
them on like they were like baseball. They were on baseballs, but and signed on like, I don't know if it was real leather, real baseballs. I thought it was,
Oh, was it like
but
early?
they all faded. They all faded over time. Could you imagine paying a
I
million dollars for
Yeah, I
that
know exactly what you're
and it
talking
fades?
about. I know
Like they
exactly what you're talking about.
disappeared.
Yeah, I remember because there's a Barry Bonds one that I was looking at, and I was like, but you could barely see the autograph on it
Yeah,
anymore. I saw it on eBay, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And maybe I don't know. When I was a kid, and I know when you were a kid, like there wasn't any autos in packs. Although I found out as an adult that Proline Portraits football, like 1991 Proline Portraits football, that set, they did have autographs in there. I had no idea as a kid. I opened a ton of that stuff and never knew that there was actually like a Walter Payton, autograph card in that set. And I mean, so that's pretty cool.
there were a few. There was a Reggie in the 90s. There was a
Yeah.
Reggie Jackson. I believe that was the first ever auto inserted into a pack, if I'm not mistaken. And then Upper Deck did one with Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench, and that was another one. And now I know there was some football. Trying to think of, I think it was Pacific. I think I'm a Steeler fan, and I remember Barry Foster has an autographed rookie card in that. I think
I
it's a
used to
rookie
collect
card,
him.
but
Yeah, Barry
yeah,
Foster, Neil Anderson, Jerome Bettis was big, of course, going back. But yeah, I remember Barry Foster having like thinking like I got to get Barry Foster cards. I still have some of his stuff.
yeah, I have in a binder the 2000 Bowman football, and a lot of people don't know this because Brady doesn't have an auto in it, but there were autographed rookie cards in that going back to 2000.
Mm,
Um, Brian Urlacher, Sean Alexander, Jamal Lewis. I think just the three of them. I have them all. I put that whole set together with the autos. But it would, man, if Tom Brady had an auto in that set, what would that set be worth?
yeah, man, it's wild. But I
It's
think
just a
about too.
card.
You just mentioned kind of these guys go into retirement and they sign a lot and everything. And now Tom Brady is tied to cards forever. He's like tied to the card shop that's in New York or wherever, Boston or wherever it is. And now he's an investor in Fanatics. So I mean, he's tied to this whole thing forever. And I just kind of wonder about that. Like I'm not saying that like his stuff is going to like crater in price, but what if he's signing until he's 80 years old?
Yeah,
For Fanatics. What
he will be.
yeah. So I mean, I guess going back now, it'll probably add. I assume his playing day stuff will be what people want, and they'll want the older stuff. They'll want the rookie auto type stuff. I would assume, but we're seeing all
Yeah,
sorts of weird, like brand new, LeBron James autograph cards 20 years later, like those sell for huge money. I
yeah.
don't get it. I don't get it.
I don't either, but that's what the market wants.
That's exactly it. Let's shift over. I've got another topic here. Card shows. So we've got the national that's coming up. I'm excited for it. I know you have to be excited for it too. Is there anything that you think is missing from card shows right now? If anything, like, is there something you wish, like, man, I wish that card shows had this or that?
I never really thought about it, Dustin. Probably maybe security these days.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Armed security everywhere.
and for us old vintage collectors, more bathrooms maybe. That's what everybody bitches about at the National.
One thing I liked in Cleveland,
Parking and restrooms.
at least
Yeah,
they had seating at the National, which was nice. You know, at
yeah.
Cleveland. Yeah, I know. Like Chicago, forget about it. You got to sit on the ground, but you
I
know, like
know.
Cleveland, but not bad.
Yeah. I went outside and sat on the ground. I mean, I just get tired of walking around, nowhere to sit. I just go sit on the curb because it's the only place anybody was where there was some room.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I don't really think about it. I mean, shows are booming. Um, it's great to see, man. It's great to see again. I hadn't been to a show. You know, I've always had to live in multiple places for work and everything. So I never had the luxury of having a card room or anything, or even being with my cards. And so, you know, I was just working all the time and traveling around. So, um, you know, I didn't get to collect. I had to take a little time off, and I got back in 2014. And I tell you, before I went to the National in Atlantic City, I hadn't been to a card show in since probably 2003. That's
Mm,
how long it had been. And it was quite the treat. And I had never been to a National. I always was just afraid to go, to be honest with you, because, you know I'm going to blow my money the first minute. I'm going to see everything. And in in the older days, you didn't have access to all these cards. You couldn't just go on to Facebook and eBay and have 82 1952 Mickey Mantles at your disposal with high
yeah,
risk scans to pick whatever one you want. You know, it's so easy now. And you'll see that people here on YouTube, they will critique every little tiny thing about the card and show you every detail because we can do that now. Because when you're shopping for a card, you can literally zoom in on that scan and see every little detail.
yeah,
Uh, it wasn't that meaningful in the old, in the old days because you just were happy to find a copy of it. You didn't have 28 to choose from.
yeah. Is there something? I mean, I know you're not going to say exactly what you're looking for. As you said, you don't necessarily want to have competition for rare stuff that is not easy to find, but you have a huge collection. Is there stuff that you like really are looking for, or is it kind of more of like you just take it as it comes because you kind of have the stuff that you want? I know it's a never ending venture. I know you can kind of collect forever, but you know, you've been collecting. I know you have a pretty large collection.
Yeah, but the thing is it's infinite. It is absolutely infinite. I still find vintage sets I didn't know existed. You know,
Mm.
and when you get into modern, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah. What,
You know,
speaking of that, you do collect some modern too. So on the back of that question, is there anything in particular, like modern wise, that you're looking for or that is interesting to you right now?
yeah, I got frustrated ripping many boxes, ripping many packs. So I've really moved to just buying singles of things that I want. And quite honestly, I don't buy a lot of super high. I don't buy any super high end modern. I buy a little bit high end modern. You know what I mean? Um, you got to pay up for a Caitlin Clark if you want it, that kind of thing.
That's the
But
only person I'm prospecting on right now is a female basketball player, which is not what I thought that was, was going to happen going back a few years ago.
very unexpected, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it is awesome. I mean, you get new things to collect. Back in the early 2000s, I was buying up Serena Williams. I was a huge fan. I watched all her matches. You could get her stuff for nothing, dollars. I have a autographed rookie card up there. I have all her rookie cards. And I was reading in one of the publications, and the rookie card I have in a PSA 10, and this was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, sold for $10,000. I'm like,
Oh
what
yeah.
is going on? But I'm glad I have them now because I wouldn't be paying today's prices for them all.
Yeah.
And I don't, I guess we all prospect to some extent if you're a modern collector. But the way I explain my prospecting is I do it defensively because over the years, I passed up on the Michael Jordan rookie when I could have got it for $30 because I thought it was too much, and then it was $100 and I thought it was too much, and blah blah blah. So I ended up having to pay over $1,000 for it, right? When I finally bought one, and same happened with like the 52 Mantle. If you don't buy it, it's going to be so expensive later. So I buy a lot of the hot prospects that I like uh, early because you could get them for next to nothing. And if they don't pan out, they don't pan out. But it's more of a fear of having to pay more later for them. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because that's kind of another good point there too. Is even if they don't necessarily turn out to be the GOAT, Michael Jordan or Mantle or whoever, if they get a big enough spike, they might correct back down. But still, after it corrects back down, still a lot more than you already could. Like how much you could have had it for, like
Oh,
so.
I tell you, with baseball, if you're just into rookie cards and you don't have to have the 1 of 1 RPA or whatever, they're on there for $5, $10, $15, and most people never heard of them. But if you follow the game, these guys could, they're supposed to be really good and they could be something special. Just go ahead and get them now. I loaded up on Aaron Judge in 2017 just because I loved him. I was watching him saying, "Oh my God, this guy's incredible." I feel like I'm watching Babe Ruth. I started buying Otani before he even got to the United States because I
Mm,
heard all these great things about him. And I love to collect the Japanese players. I have a Japanese card collection, so I started buying him before he even got here. As soon as they started making those, what are they, Leaf cards, tops now. And so when they started making his cards, I was buying them up, and that panned out. But I started buying Kenny Pickett cards. That hasn't panned out yet.
yeah,
But as a Steeler fan, I wanted my local my team's quarterback,
yeah.
and I did the same thing with Big Ben. He turned out all right, and so sometimes you hit, sometimes you don't. But when you're only paying a little bit of money, so what? So what?
Is it the best time now? Granted, I understand stuff was less expensive going back 5-7 years, but as a baseball card collector with all the different options and kind of everything that we have now, is it the best time to be a baseball card collector right now like, if you're looking at the hobby as a whole and all the different offerings and all the different options? I guess singles buyers, you go back 100+ years for baseball cards.
Yeah, baseball card collectors are loyal and passionate, and that's what's always really kept the hobby going. I mean, if you look at vintage football, it sells for pennies,
Uh,
pennies.
it's sad, really.
Most vintage basketball, aside from a handful of the biggest cards, sell for nothing. Hockey, aside from the biggest handful of cards, nothing. So baseball's always kept it going. I'll tell you, I'm not sure there's ever been a better time to be a baseball fan unless you go back to Babe Ruth's height. The height of Babe Ruth, or you go back and watch Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron
You mean
and
because all the
Clemente
talent?
play.
Because of all the
Yeah,
talent?
all the talent, man. Yeah, I mean, you got Paul Skeens and Aaron Judge and Otani, and there's some just it's a fun game to watch, despite the fact that 216 hitters an all-star now,
Mm.
and nobody can hit to the opposite field, and nobody cares about defense anymore, and they wear oven mitts, and the bases are the
Yeah,
size of my car,
huge.
and
Yeah.
everybody's stealing all these bases, and they keep bragging about it, even though you're not allowed to throw to first, more than twice, or they get awarded the thing. Anyway, the rule changes have really opened up the game, but I mean, it's an exciting time to watch baseball. Exciting players. You've never seen an Otani before.
Mm.
I
Now,
mean, you could say Babe Ruth, but he stopped pitching. If Otani pitches, goes back to doing that. That's just incredible. I would love to see him as a closer, man. He wouldn't have to put the strain on his arm. Imagine
right.
him being a DH and a closer. That'd be awesome. I was hoping to watch him face Aaron Judge in Game 7 of the World Series as a closer. That would have been great, like when he faced Mike Trout in the World game.
It seems like a good happy medium, to where he can do
Hmm.
both. I'm not a
Yeah,
baseball.
yeah, I don't think he's good. I mean, 2 Tommy John surgeries. He's not going to hold up as a starter for many years. I don't think. But a closer, maybe he would come in, face a couple batters. I don't know. That's
What's
what
up?
I would do with him. But
What's up with like all the Tommy John surgeries? Is that just like velocity of pitchers now and having to throw just velocity angles and all that stuff? Because you go back in time, like
absolutely,
I always think of Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux is always the guy I think about because he was not a high velocity pitcher. He was just a placement guy. Like he was
yeah,
just accurate as hell. Nolan Ryan or some of these guys, they were just like warriors.
yeah. I mean, they teach them to throw as hard as they can. It's just like, why doesn't anybody hit to the opposite field anymore? because they teach them to turn and hit for power. They just teach differently these days. Um, and, I'm not so sure that some of the old guys didn't throw as hard as these guys. When you're looking at, especially Nolan Ryan, you're looking at Bob Gibson. A lot of these guys threw really hard. Sudden Sam McDowell, Bob Veal, Ryan Dern. They changed the way they clocked the pitch. I don't know if you know that.
No.
They weren't always able to clock the pitch. They used to use all kind of contraptions. I remember even when Nolan Ryan was young. But they used to clock it when it crossed home plate. Now they clock it when it leaves the hand. And I suspected they did that to make the game more exciting because everybody wants to see home runs and 100-mile-an-hour fastballs.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like how basketball's completely switched over to the 3-point shot. It's almost like a Moneyball, type shift where they basically just did the math and they're like, hey, if we've got guys that can shoot, like a Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, if we got guys that can knock them down, then we should throw up 100 a game or whatever, and just and just let the cards fall where they may.
I'll tell you what's the greatest playoffs in any sport, playoff series, multiple series you've ever seen.
The greatest
in any sport
playoffs.
The matchup.
I'm thinking about a couple of them. I mean, for baseball, it's definitely the Red Sox Yankees when the Red Sox came back in that series. But part of the reason why I think is because I don't watch tons of baseball. And so that was a series I distinctly remember because I don't watch, the World Series. I don't watch I don't watch all the games or any of that. And so there's just the story behind that. That was fun to watch. The Warriors and the Cavs, the Bulls when they played the Knicks, the Bulls, when I was a kid, the Bulls, Knicks, Bulls, Pistons, those were, I remember I went to bed crying when the Pistons used to beat MJ and the Bulls. MJ had kind of that cool story arc where he was so amazing, but his team just wasn't good enough. And the Pistons just beat on him. And then finally they got over the hump. And then of course, like his father dies, he's retiring and then he's coming back. Like he has like such a cool story arc throughout his career. I think that kind of lends to his legend, but I don't know. Were those the answers you were looking for?
For me, hands down, it's the Celtics, Lakers, baby.
Celtics,
Magic, and Bird.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up in Pittsburgh, we didn't have a basketball team. We weren't really into basketball, but I'll tell you what, we get together and watch those games. We get together and watch those like we'd watch a Steeler game on Sunday. What a great matchup! I have a ticket sitting over there from the Coliseum. I mean, just great memories. And when Bird and Magic came into the league, it was so exciting, right? It was these fresh young players and who most of us followed in college, and they played against each other in a championship. I kind of think, and now I don't want anybody to give me hate comments or come down on me for saying this because I don't know it's the same necessarily the same, but similar that this is what Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese may be doing to the WNBA. Nobody talked about the WNBA. Now everybody's talking about it, and her card just sold for a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, it's a weird, and I told you, I bought a bunch of I bought a bunch of Caitlin Clark rookie cards, Select and Prism. I don't have any of her Iowa stuff, but I was specifically looking for the new stuff. And it's not cheap. I got some good news today on a PSA submission. I do have I've got some 10s for Caitlin Clark that are coming back. I also have a 4, and I also have 2 that were N6s. So we'll have to see what happens.
You have a 4?
I have a 4, but now, okay. So
did you know it was a 4? That's what you got.
It was a beat up card. Yeah. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to grade well. And it kind of graded out but this is a card that's like it's 4 years old. Like it's, it's not a vintage card or anything. And then I've got 2 I'll do a whole video on it because I think it's interesting, but I pulled them out of a pack and they got like the N6 designation. I literally pulled them on my, I think what is the N6? Is it is it too short or something or
N6?
It's like a do not grade.
Minimum size.
Yeah, I think it might be a minimum size, and I pulled these like directly out of the box, on my channel.
Yeah, I mean it's especially with vintage cards. Anybody who collected vintage knows those cards were not all the exact same size. When we would have them when we were young in a box, you could not just it wasn't smooth if you ran your hand over it. Some of them would stick up. Oftentimes they were oversized, and PSA seems to be. I watch these videos and it'll be like a third of their submissions are minimum size. And
No,
I'm
so
not
vintage
believing
stuff.
that these are all trimmed. I'm not. And there's a lot of savvy, collectors, longtime collectors who are measuring these things and know what they're looking at. But I'm not convinced. I think they're using some sort of AI tool or something that's so precise that anything that deviates even a little bit is getting that, because it just
Yeah,
doesn't make sense. And then you could send them to SGC and they'll give them a number. Uh, and you could do it vice versa too. I don't know if you saw. There was a Joe DiMaggio. It was graded well. It was, let me go back and say what it was. It was a 1936 worldwide gum Joe DiMaggio. One of the most expensive Joe DiMaggios, if not the most on the planet. They were issued out of Canada. It's a rare set. Uh, it had an A. It sold for, I think it was $22,000.
whoa.
Whoever bought it, cracked it out, sent it to PSA. They gave it a 6.5, right? And
I
at the
think
next auction, it
I heard you.
sold for over 120,000.
Yeah, I heard you talking about this on a
Same
live.
exact
Yeah,
card, because we collect numbers now, right? So it's the exact same card, just a different holder. But
yeah,
when you're going to say it's minimum size, it better be. There's a lot of money involved in this today.
interesting. Yeah, vintage cards, man. It's a whole different ball game with vintage stuff. But you're right. It could be that it's just miscut, or it came out like that. Who knows? I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, and there were certainly miscuts, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
You see some on an angle, some with half the other card on it. Yeah, all kind of things.
All right, John. Well, we just hit the 1 hour mark, so I feel like I should probably shut this down. We'll have to do a part two, hopefully, sometime soon. I've been on here for 5 years, and it's the first time you've been on, so I'll have to do a better job of that. And I'm excited to see you at the National. I know we'll run into each other like we usually do.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. This was fun. I had fun talking cards and stuff, and it's nice to be on your channel. I always feel like, well, not always. It's my first time, but on your channel, I feel like I could just be candid.
Absolutely. I wish too that before I let you go, I know that I think part of the disconnect going back to the YouTubers, I think part of it for me is just because I don't collect vintage baseball cards. And it's not that I don't love them, appreciate them. I really appreciate the history and all that, but I'm a football guy first, and then I'm probably a basketball guy second. And it's exactly kind of what you said, where the football cards are a fraction of the baseball. So it's kind of like if I'm going to buy a vintage card, I just usually get more excited about the Unitas rookie or the Bart Starr rookie that I've got or whatever. So I end up going that direction. But I do.
Well, there were a lot of people that didn't have any cards. They were just jumping on because sports cards were so hot. They were trying to become an influencer and an expert. I think that's what robbed people the wrong way. An overnight expert, an instant expert. And I honestly, I don't think a lot of people thought you had any cards when you first started.
Yeah.
Because you had the sports finance, you had you were the finance dad or something.
Yeah, the personal finance dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you saying something. You're like, people don't think I have cards, and you showed your football collection one day. I was laughing.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the problem too when you're doing like the news stuff and you're trying to do kind of the current events. But I could definitely show a card each video. That's something that I've thought about too. But then it's like, am I just showing the card like?
Let's be honest, Dustin. I'm not to interrupt you, but let's be honest. People don't want to watch cards. Apparently, they don't want to look at cards. I mean, if you look at the biggest channels, they don't show cards.
Yeah, I mean, I did a reaction to Jeff did kind of like, we're opening up $10,000 boxes. That's really what gets the eyeballs.
Yeah.
I bought a $5,000 card, or I spent $50,000, and unfortunately, that's not going to be my video unless I'm just lying in the lying.
Yeah, or Jab's making his newlywed wife on their honeymoon go to Walmart to buy packs and open them.
Yeah, I mean, my wife,
that was hilarious.
Might do it once. I don't know. My wife might do it once, but I don't think I could get her to do it often.
All right, Dustin. Well, thanks for having me on. This was great. I hope to do it again.
All right, dude. We'll talk to you later, John. Have a good one.